and welcome back to Desert DIY. If you are new here, my name is Corey. Today I am taking this trashy table and making it into a classy farmhouse beauty. This is what it looked like when I first got it, and I fixed it up for a family member. She bought it and brought it to me and was hoping that it still had life left in it, which it definitely did. So the first thing that we did is my husband tightened down all the screws for me. And it was a lot of loose screws here, and the wood had kind of warped a little bit. It had been left outside and in the weather, so it did change its shape, and the paint was peeling all off everywhere, and it was just a hot mess. But once we got the legs back on, it was already looking much better. And of course, my little man had to get in there and practice with his tools. Here he is giving Daddy his tools for him. Once the table was put back together, I took a bristle, like a wire bristle brush, and scraped off all of the mud and then sanded it down with some 220 grit sandpaper by hand. The reason I had to do this was because since it had been left outdoors before I got my hands on it, the weather had made the paint chip off, and it was obvious that it had been sitting outside in some dirt and mud during rain. So I had to give it a really good cleaning and a really good sanding before I could put any kind of paint on this piece. So I just did like a little shimmy sanding and got all the chips off of all of the legs before I did anything else. The next step is to fill in any cracks on the legs with some wood filler. I like this wood filler by Minwax that comes in a tube. It is a lot like just wet sawdust, and it fits into cracks very easily, and it's so easy to smooth out. I just absolutely love this wood filler for cracks like this. It does not hold its own shape if you were to try and fill in large gouges or missing pieces of wood. So just keep that in mind. It's mostly just for cracks, to fill in cracks in a wood grain. And of course, ignore my dirty backyard. The kids were having a good time, and we have the hoses out because it's been so hot that we've had to water our plants a lot more often than usual. I cleaned the table off with a hose, and I was just extra careful to not spray in the areas where I had done the wood filler. Once that was dry, the next day, I flipped it back upside down, of course, because I always paint my pieces upside down first, and I went in with a matte 2x coverage spray paint by Rust-Oleum. I just used this matte paint as a primer for the legs because there was a lot of bare wood that had been exposed from the paint chipping off and then from me sanding it. I realized that there was a lot more chipping going on the rest of the piece, so I went in with my orbital sander on a lot of these flat surfaces and just sanded off all the chipping everywhere. When I do a piece, I like to make sure that since I'm starting upside down, that I take good care of the underside of the piece. So I just went ahead and sanded all of this and prepped it to be painted as well. And in order to clean the piece, I just use my air compressor and this blower attachment, and I blow off all the dust and paint chips. This works so much faster than anything else, and it gets off all of the little chunks that a rag might leave behind. Now I'm going to use that same spray paint again and spray paint the underside of this table. And I went back over some of the legs again too, because I had looked and there were some spots that still needed some more paint. And then I thought that it would be nice to paint the entire underside with this white as well. I didn't worry about getting full coverage of paint on the underside, but just enough to make sure that the paint is not going to chip again in the future with its new indoor use, since it is going to be an indoor table and I'm using all indoor paints. But I just wanted it to look a little more clean and finished. That way, if somebody were to need to clean underneath there, you know, it would look really nice and finished. Now for the top coat of paint. I'm still using Rust-Oleum, but this is a gloss protective enamel. Enamel paint is very high gloss and it is very, very durable. So I'm just going to check and make sure that the paint that I had sprayed on as the primer is completely dry before spraying on this gloss enamel. And this enamel paint takes quite a while to dry, so I gave it several hours to dry after I was done painting with it. But the finish it gives is so strong. I absolutely love this paint, and you can use it over metal, and it says on there that it stops rust. So that just shows you how strong this paint is, if it can stop rust from bleeding through a piece of metal. And I have used this on rusty metal before, and it does work. It does exactly what it says it does. And I thought this would be perfect for the legs of a dining table, because people bump their chairs on the legs and whatnot, and food gets on there, you know, it's inevitable, it's gonna happen. So it's just nice to have a really durable finish that's easy to clean. Now for the top of the table. I do not like using any paint strippers in my dry desert climate. They're just not very easy to use since they dry too quickly. Here in our climate, you would have to have it completely wrapped and make sure no air got to it before it dried up, because once paint stripper dries up, it doesn't work anymore and it's just a bigger mess. So I prefer to strip off paint when possible with a sandpaper. So I started this sanding journey with a 60 grit sandpaper, and you can see that there is a crack down the center, or the center right side of this table. So I used that 60 grit sandpaper to level that area out, and then once that was done, I went back over again to get the rest of the paint off with an 80 grit. 60 grit works really well to help even out wood and do like really big drastic sanding, whereas 80 grit does better at removing the paint without tearing up the wood. So I used 60 first to get the paint scuffed up, 80 to take it off, and now I'm going to go over it with some 220, and I want to show you how slowly I go over it to give it a really smooth finish. Since I'm going with a shiny glossy finish on this table, I want it to be extremely soft, and you can see as I'm going the difference in the wood grain from the left of the table to the right of the table as I'm going across it. That 220 grit sandpaper is working hard on this piece. It did such a great job. Again, I'm going to use that same wood filler and fill in all the cracks on the wood. Now remember, this is best used for cracks like these, and if you have big chunks of veneer missing, or you need to reshape a piece that has been broken off, this is not the correct type of wood filler that you would use, but it does work wonders for cracks like these. I just spread it over the cracks, and then I wipe it back and forth and in circles over the crack until it's completely smooth and the whole crack has been filled in. This table had quite a few cracks in it. Like I said, in our dry desert climate, things dry out. When you leave things outdoors, not only is it going to get water damage, but it's also going to dry out when it's wood, and sometimes that's worse than water damage. Now I'm just going to go back over again with 220 grit sandpaper and smooth out all that excess of the wood filler that I used to make sure that it's not going to affect the final color of stain. and then of course finish off with cleaning it off with my air compressor. This is what I was left with. Thankfully, I'm going to be using a dark gray stain, and here it is. This is going to hide all the weird variations and stains that were left in the wood from it having been left outside. Now, I want to show you guys, I had tried to make a custom mix of whitewash, which is right here, whitewash pickling, and that weathered wood gray stain, but I came to find out that the whitewash is water-based, and the gray stain is oil-based, and if you know anything about oil and water, they do not mix. So that actually did not work, and I ended up having to just use the gray stain, but I did like how it turned out, so I wasn't that upset. I'm gonna have to go to Sherwin-Williams and ask them to make me a lighter gray stain for future projects that I want to do in a more light gray color. And I'm thinking I might try doing a whitewash paint over gray too in the future if I don't get to go and pick up that stain from Sherwin-Williams. Whitewashing with watered down paint is just a little bit harder to get a really even coverage to where it doesn't look blotchy. So that's why I'm hoping to get it in just an actual stain color itself. I did 2 coats of this dark gray stain and it looked absolutely perfect. Now the final step is putting on the polyacrylic to seal it. I used a semi-gloss and I did very light coats, and I did 3 coats on this piece, and look at how beautiful and shiny it turned out. I am so amazed with the transformation of this table. I'm always so surprised to see something that looks like it can be thrown away turn into something so absolutely gorgeous. Look at how even that stain came out, how perfect the clear coat looks. There were no brush strokes in the clear coat because I did very thin coats. And then I paired it with these metal chairs just to show you an idea of how it would look with chairs like this. And I just think it looks so cute. Let me know what you guys think of this project down in the comments below. I would love to hear if you guys like this gray and white color combination for a dining table. I think it looks so good. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and if you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit subscribe and the like button, and I will see you next time. Bye!